This episode of Outside Insights is brought to you by Placers, a values-led staffing partner helping businesses and individuals reach their highest potential. Build a flexible workforce or take the next step in your career at myplacers.com. Welcome to the next Outside Insights podcast. We've got one goal, and it's to provide content that helps you close your personal and professional gaps, frankly, by hearing how other people have done it. I'm your host, Chris Burkhardt. Today, I'm more than thrilled to have Sam Maddula on the show. Sam, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on Outside Insights today. I appreciate it. My audience knows we have some prep with this stuff. It's like we're not saying, hey, Sam, this is the first moment, but we're going to get right into you. You have been an entrepreneur. You've built a business. You're a leader in healthcare. You scaled it to a size that is very impressive. You exited, and now you're doing amazing things with philanthropy and with advice and counsel in the field. Why is it important when you've had nothing but this story of success to come on a platform like Outside Insights and share your story and share your ideas?
I think the honest truth is, you mentioned a little bit of success. It's nice, but I don't want to live off of yesterday's success. I want to, keep forging ahead. That's just an innate driver in me. So I don't know how a therapist would feel about that, but I'm okay with it.
As long as I think what I'm told is as entrepreneurs, as long as we stop rowing the boat and occasionally look back at the shore or occasionally look at the sunset, I think we're okay. It's when we only row and row and row, Sam, right?
Yeah. So, with that said, like I have to obviously be mindful and not continuously just row. And my wife is very good about making sure I'm not rowing and I take in the bigger picture with my family, kids, etc. But, in that proverbial analogy, like I still like the boat and I still like rowing and I like being on the lake and seeing what's ahead.
So I recently had a state treasurer on the podcast who became a friend of mine. And I had to say, Colleen, I have no idea what a state treasurer does, right? And the audience liked that. So you have built something immensely successful in specialty pharmaceuticals. Can you just let us in behind the curtain and talk a little bit about what the heck that is and talk about that marketplace a little bit?
Sure. And, I think a lot of times we use all these crazy fancy words and analogies and terms in finance and healthcare and all that, but I'll break it really simple because that's what we learn in pharmacy school. As a specialty pharmacy, what my company did was we procured medications for folks who have behavioral health issues, so all types of mental behavioral issues, and folks who have substance use disorder. And these were what we call specialty drugs. They are not available at like a local CVS or Walgreens. Your doctor would prescribe them, and then we would work and do all the diligence and the paperwork and all that. And then we would ultimately send those medications out to the physician and get those approved and then send it out to the physician. And each drug can cost anywhere from $2,000 to $20,000. Think of how hard it is for someone to get like a MRI and it costs a couple $100. Well, these are drugs that need to get approved and they're also life-saving. So patients genuinely need it. It's not like a cholesterol medicine as much as it's life-saving. You can maybe miss a dose or two. It'll be fine. You can't miss this medication. So long story short, what we did is we saw the need in behavioral health and we said, you know what, let's tackle the problem. That's a simplistic way to put it.
Understood. Is it just now I'm easing into like my own business mind? Are you solving the problem for the doctor or the patient or a little bit of both?
By solving the problem for the physician, you'd solve it for the patient. Because unlike other companies, the more we do here, the more patient lives we're touching, right? So the more my top line grows, the more patient lives we're touching. So the doctor can prescribe it, but they only have so many tools in a system that has limited resources, limited capital. So what would normally take them, let's just say 20 hours, we can get it down to 20 minutes in-house and we get the medication to the patient so they can give it to the physician. And then again, seeing how easy it is, keep multiplying and multiplying and multiplying.
Somewhere along the line, you had some early life experiences that pushed you towards large degrees in the pharma space. What caused the interest to get into it?
In the pharma space,
Yes,
growing up, I had my parents who were basically pharmacy technicians. So they're the people you see at like a CVS, and they worked for my uncle, who's a pharmacist. So I kind of basically grew up in like a local mom and pop's pharmacy. Like those were my first steps. So that's all I knew. And I actually didn't really want to go to pharmacy school. I wanted to be in business. And this was kind of like a way to fulfill both.
I'm really glad. I didn't know what you were going to say there about that. There usually is an exposure that causes us to decide how we want to create our own reality with something, right?
Mhm.
Like I grew up playing on the floor of my dad's staffing firm and swore I was just going to go into business, but not recreate my own version of it, which I ultimately did. But it was those experiences playing with Matchbox cars on his reception floor that shaped my perspective and opinion. That's for sure. Okay. Well, that gives me a clear sense of things. So, if you don't mind, what we did, Sam and I have talked about that a lot of times. All anybody wants to talk about is his founder story of his business, founding Banks Apothecary. But I do think it's important. You built this business. It's you're what would you say? You're an overnight success. 12 years in the making. Is that how that goes along the way?
I think that's probably not accurate. I don't know if it's an overnight success. There's a lot of hurdles and all that. So yeah.
Well, that you missed the 12 years in the making.
Yeah. So it took a long time, a long time.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about that business and the path that you took to ultimately exit the business?
Sure. The company that I just told you, the specialty pharmacy that we built, was started in inner city Philadelphia. That was just where the opportunity was. And we created this, and we started with just helping the local physicians in the inner city to Philadelphia. So for folks, your listeners who are from the Pennsylvania area, we were in North Philadelphia by Einstein Hospital. So a rough area, but yet, we were helping those local patients. And then it kind of took on a little bit of steam, and we were getting more and more need for this, and other physicians were catching on. So we started doing a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And then slowly went to tour the rest of Philly, rest of PA, and then the entire mid Atlantic seaboard. And then, of course, during this process, there's a lot of challenges, a lot of setbacks, a lot of fights with various companies, who have all of their own self interest, a lot of staffing, a lot of things that happen. But, in a broad picture, we started with inner city Philly. And again, the work that I did in behavioral health does not, discriminate by color, race, gender, ethnicity. It affects all people. I have extended family that are affected by this. So there's a need universally in our country. And I think I kind of just touched the icing, or the top of the iceberg, but it goes way deeper.
So, in terms of being a leader and an entrepreneur, what part of it did you gravitate towards? Were you the CEO of the business? Were you more of the chief strategy or the one who built it? What role did you play over the business?
It's an easy answer. I did everything. I was the founder. I founded it with two other family members who gave me capital infusion. I was the owner, founder, CEO, the head pharmacist. In the beginning, every role, the guy who picks up the garbage, takes out the garbage, who cleans the tables, hire, fire, learn, educate, promote, go to court, battle the insurance companies, everything and anything under the sun.
Good to know we have that in common too, Sam. That is for sure. And it's hard if I have plenty of folks that are in senior leadership roles that, end up working in a role where their job description and scorecard defines their actions and behaviors a certain way. There is really something to what Sam's talking about because it's hard to stop taking the trash out, right? It's for me, it was I always used to open the mail, Sam, no matter what, even though they'd say, you don't have to open the mail, someone else will get that. But I had always opened the mail. It was hard for me to stop to do that. And it's humbling and, certainly makes it hard to scale a business, in terms of making sure everybody knows what their roles are along the way. But it sounds like you made it work.
I think, if you look at any corporation, right? Like what I did, a lot of people ask me, like, what's my secret sauce or something like that. It sounds so cliche, but your secret sauce is just pure hard work. When you start, like if you look at a general corporation, they have, like you just mentioned, everybody kind of plugs into some role, like a strategy officer, a growth officer, a human capital officer, you name it, right? There's like an officer for everything. When you're starting a company, like a literal company, like a pharmacy or a specialty pharmacy, and not like a nothing against apps, but not like a software company, right? You're physically doing everything. So like your brain is adapting on how to do everything around you. And then when you find people and as you grow and you can afford, you can bring people in to fit those various roles. But you are the person that is cultivating that idea and kind of creating it and then therefore scaling it. The only part of that that you kind of have to let go eventually, little bits, right, is say, hey, maybe I might not open the mail every day. I'll have someone do that. But I trust them enough to bring the serious pieces of mail to me. And that was a big growth part for me when I found the right people that I can then trust to dedicate work that I can then still be in charge. We went from, again, no revenue to, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue. You need to scale, but yet, even in the very end pre sale, I still had my ears. I don't like using cliches, but, ear to the ground. And I understood every aspect of what everybody's doing, even if I wasn't doing it.
It makes
And then one thing I'd like to add is you do need to let go. And if you have the right people, it'll be very easier. It's a lot easier to let go.
so there's a lot of versions of this, but how did you use an operating system like scaling up or traction or run a business plan like that? Or do you have another means by which you ran the business? People are always curious about that.
Yeah. I'm like a very old school guy. I always joke I'm like a 30 some odd year old in like a 7-year-old body or a
Huh.
7-year mind in a 30-year-old body. It's kind of like I'm very old school. And I think at the end of the day, I go back to my skill is I can understand and feel things and know what's going on. So we never had a sales force. It was all word of mouth. We didn't have like a 5-year business plan or anything. It was just iterating. It was like, okay, I'll give you a very simplistic example. Like we were working in that North Philadelphia area and, we started with 5 doctors. And we're like, okay, do we have the capacity to take on 5 more docs, which is 100 more patients? Sure. Let's do it. And then we're like, okay, we have more capacity, but we need more people. Let's hire more people. I look at business like building a sandcastle. You got to build that little house. You get a foundation. And you're like, okay, it's still only 1 o'clock in the afternoon. The sun's still out. Let's build a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And you just keep building. There's no end goal. It is just doing till you like it.
When did you know you had finished the sandcastle for you? When did you know?
I think in literal terms, that's like when was I thinking about leaving or
Yeah.
exiting? Yeah. I think, I started in 2010. I graduated in 2009 from pharmacy school, residency, and all that stuff. So, in around roughly 2019, so pre pandemic 2020, I said to myself, this is doing great. I can still do this, but there needs to be some change because one thing, even though I let go, I just told you earlier, there's a lot of people that report to me. Well, then you get more and more and more people, right? And at one point, we had 30 people. It's a lot of people reporting to a single person. And I was like, okay,
I'd say you're
this
a
is
little crazy to have all 30 reporting to you, but I haven't earned that right.
I am crazy. My wife will attest to that.
Yeah.
I think you need to have a little bit of crazy. You need to run companies. And I said, okay, I'm getting exhausted. Mind you, I was probably at that point 30 years old. So I'm like, wow, getting tired. And I said, how do I take some load off my chest? I was looking for another CEO that I could mentor. Didn't really find anyone with the same type of grit and grind and that really can get it. This is not a job you can work from home, etc. It's like, okay, what do I do? And people were thinking about exiting, whatnot. And then again, to speed up the story, the gist of it is, my wife and I were trying to have kids. It was difficult. The pandemic hit. We were just having a hard time conceiving. And so that was uh, a tough moment. We ended up doing IVF. We had a beautiful baby daughter. My wife, who- maternal care in this country is very not the best.
There you go.
And my wife almost passed away postpartum due to medical mistakes, concerns, issues. And that was like my kind of quote unquote come to Jesus moment and woke up and I was like, I'm spending 70 hours in the office. Like this is not really sustainable, right? Like all the money in the world is not gonna give me time with my daughter or my wife. And I didn't want to wake up 70 years old one day and say, hey, what happened to my life? And so I said, I got to think of a succession plan. And that eventually led to, a bunch of companies, private equity firms looking to purchase, and we went with one.
I one of the things I talk about a lot, Sam, is if we're not careful, we'll miss the reason we get out of bed. It's the purpose, and that it does change. It changes for our employees and it changes for us as founders and presidents and folks that take out the trash. And that may be the best example on 68 shows that someone has shared, that the same crazy person who wanted to work 100 hours a week to build this business, to build value, sits up and says there's more to life. And of course,
Yeah.
it took something pretty big to shake you, but that's what happens. And I think that's the best reason. Now, people are always curious, what's private equity like? What's that exit like? I realize you can't tell every story, but it seems I'll get 10 questions about this, about what was it like to find private equity and work with them, and how long did you have to stay and all that stuff.
I mean, look, I think I can be relatively honest. I mean, I think if you're honest and you abide by good ethos when you leave, et cetera, you're in good relationship. Look, at the end of the day, when you're working with private equity or any company you sell to, you have to mentally know you're selling your house. Okay. Your house is a perfect example. Like I am selling this. It's not mine anymore. And I'm getting a pretty penny for selling it. So I can't walk into, you know, my bedroom like I own it. And so that's the mindset you have to go into. If you ran a good business and you did the best that you could to run it, meaning you followed all the laws to the best of your ability and did everything to the best of your ability, it's not that bad. And I genuinely mean that. I looked at multiple private equities. Again, I had the luxury of multiple folks kind of coming to me and saying, hey, we'd like to buy your company. And I think if you do what feels right, it's not bad. But you got to go with the right expectations. Somebody's paying you a pretty penny, you're going to give it up. And in my particular case, I made the terms that, hey, I will sell the company, but I am going to leave. Like, I am not going to hang around. I didn't create this baby to have two stewards. The private equity will take over. I will be there for literally a 2.5 month transition. And then I turned over the literal keys to them.
Something really powerful about that is about really knowing what you want. Those decisions. Do I stay for 2 years for transition? Do I think about a second bite of the apple? Any of those things, right? No, so that's really, thank you for sharing that.
So on that second bite of the apple, right? Again, you want that because you're chasing additional dollars and things like that. But what makes sense to you? Like, could I have had a second bite of the apple? Of course. Could I stayed on? Of course. They would have loved for me to stay on. But the thing is, for me, why am I leaving? I'm leaving because I built this company to the best of my singular ability. And I'm leaving to spend time with my family and be there with my children, something I didn't get the luxury because my parents were blue collar workers. If I'm doing that, well, then am I really going to be happy working for somebody else who's going to tell me how to run my own company or my former company? No. So do I give up some dollars for some freedom? Yes. That was my decision.
Sam, I couldn't help notice Sam currently has a business workshop strategy. I notice your values are front and center. I've listened to you talk. You talk about things like abundance and you're not versus a scarcity mentality. Where'd you learn that? I mean, where'd you learn to make your values so distinct and forward in your business and your life?
Just, I think, trials and tribulations of life. I grew up, I was born with nothing. I was born blind. I came to America for surgery at the age of 2. People who follow me know the story, but I received the gift of sight through a physician from a nonprofit called the Eye Foundation of America. I now have pretty close to very good vision. since I was 2 years old. And then I saw my parents struggle and I said, okay, when I and if I one day had the chance to create a company, what am I going to do? And what I'll do is just work hard. And if you work hard, that means there's some part of my life I think that somehow, either through osmosis or being in proximity or being the recipient of other people's charitable work, that allowed me to be empathetic. So that empathy allowed me, I think, to be, some people would argue, but I argue that to be a relatively good boss. And so then I found it, I created values internally of like, how do I want to run this company? And so the new company I started, which is all about advising and helping other people create better companies, is based on the same principles.
Okay. You know, the look on your face was one of curiosity, I thought, when I asked the question. I think you've, in your advising work, you realize that many businesses work two ways. They work with values on the wall that they don't live, or they have very distinct values that they haven't written down that are carried out in actions every day. But they may not know the gap in both cases. Right? So to see somebody aligned is really interesting to me. And I spend a lot of time in that area. So it's obvious based on your story of your first business and second business that that's an important way to which you conduct business and live your life.
Yeah, I think once I sold and I had time to process, post sale is extremely difficult, I think, for most people. And I think if you take out the edge cases, if somebody says it was a breeze, they're probably coloring in the gray. It's very difficult. And I had to really think about what I'm going to do next and how I'm going to do it. And I said, let me actually, write it out and then showcase it. Right. Again, I can't advise other people simply because I've done something good. They have to understand how it would benefit them.
Yes.
So you have to really, advisory work is very hard. And that's why I don't call it consulting. When you consult, you're just giving them, like if you go to a doctor's office, you might get a cardiology consult. They're just helping you on the heart. I think when you advise someone, you're helping them holistically. So when I work with companies, I again start from the ground up. Like, what is it that they're needing and what's causing them to have difficulty getting there? So it's not really one system. Usually there's one thematic systemic concern that we really have to target.
Do you often invest in the businesses that you're helping with, or is that just a very separate thing?
I don't invest in any of the businesses I'm helping with. I actually take a very agnostic approach and I don't invest. I don't have any relationships. I don't bill dollars for hours. I have a monthly retainer so that they're literally able to out to me at any point and they can have me. So there is no conflict. We are on the same side once we work together. So again, if I'm working with Chris, I advise Chris on what to do and I want the best for him. And the contract literally says you could remove me with a 5-day notice and I can remove you. This is not like a cell phone contract. My job, that's the way I see it, is to help you. And I only want to be there for as long as you need that help. If you don't need it, great.
You said to me when we first met that you wish someone like yourself had shown up at the doorstep to offer advising for you. I think that's how you've taken an approach to this. How have you found the marketplace to respond to that approach? And obviously, it's obviously your objective today is to not rest on your laurels and have success be, to continue to contribute. How's that going? And what would you like to talk about relative to your new business?
It's going well. I also have a very hard ceiling. I do not work with more than 4 companies/founders at a time, so that the folks I work with, I give them my all, meaning I do in-person meetings. I meet with their staff. I meet with their other founders or other, their partners and things like that. So it's going very well. I think it says a lot about founders who maybe are running a great top line company, but aren't making much profits. And then they're hiring me as an additional burden, on their P&L. And the fact that they're doing it says like, hey, I'm ready. Like, let's go. And I think it tells me I am offering something that the market needs. I think if there's anything I'd like to add, it's that I would want this message of like, hey, a unapologetic, completely agnostic. I want what's best for you type of advisory role is out there. And again, I wish something like this existed when I was there, but I don't know if I would have found it. So like a lot of times I just want people to know that this is a resource that's available.
Well, what I think is, if I'm understanding it correctly, but please modify my statement if I've misheard you. There's all these sayings about advice type business consultants that, craft shows up on the Nabisco slide, right? That the formula is a formula, but what you're really talking about is starting from kind of a blank sheet of paper, if you will, learning them and building them up with your expertise. See, you're not serving all four clients the same way, I would guess. That's yeah.
Look, I don't go in with any type of formulaic system. That is not how you build a company. Again, look, there's nothing wrong against consultants. I think they're very good at really going really deep in certain aspects. But most of them, actually everyone that I've known has never built a company. So how do you teach someone how to cook if you're not a chef or if you never made a meal? So you gotta have done it to teach it or or you gotta be under their shoes. So like a lot of times you can ask my wife, like the reason I keep it to four people is because I really do bring it all to the table. There is nothing left.
I think as I listen to you, I was going to ask if you might like to share a little bit of thoughts on what you might like to teach or some advice that like, some baseline advice from either your first business or your consultation. Is there a set of themes that you see in the work that you do that you might like to share and address?
Yeah, and I think I can probably even subdivide it from what I've seen, what I've done personally versus what I see now.
Yes.
What I've done personally is to keep again, I think some of these might sound cliche, but I don't, and I'm saying that I'm reinforcing it because I don't see this happen in practice. What I've done personally is the people that I've hired have always not fit the perfect formulaic resume, but they're people that really needed a job. And they had this kind of hustle slash fire in them. And then I also wanted them to be happy. So I never said, Chris really needs a job. So let me pay him bottom dollar and he'll work like, an indentured servant. I then said, okay, he really needs a job. And if I can pay him really well, he'll be happy and work hard because you need that. You don't expect every day to be flowers and roses, but business is hard. It's not like working at like a random, plug and play corporate company. It's really hard. So I learned to get good people that are willing to work and pay them what you really would want to be paid if you were in that role. Those very, very important. With that said, what I've seen in workshop strategy about with founders, I would say the older ones that have started companies, let's just call it in the early, mid, even late 90s, early 2000s, is that they're doing a system in a way and it worked for them. And now they don't know how to fix that anymore. They don't know how to work in 2025.
Understood.
Like that's a big theme that I see. The other that I see is a big one. Folks are like, all right, Sam, I got this company. And let's just say they were in year two of my company, right? All right, what do we do so that I can sell and make a ton of money one day? It doesn't work like that. This is not a software app. It doesn't work like that. You could have like an eventual goal to eventually sell, but right now we're just, laying the bricks. So we just got to do the grunt work. Again, I've done it. So I can tell them very point blank, like, hey, this is how it's done. So I see founders that are like, all right, we got to do all this, you know, let's do it. Let's push, 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 push. And I'm like, you're going to burn out. Not how we do it.
Yeah, a couple comments. A great book called Uncontainable by the Container Store that has
Hmm.
that core belief about, knowing what you want in a person and paying them very well for it. And,
Hmm.
sometimes that means that, you have less people in that model. And of course, your second point, I think I come from your school, frankly. Build a business, believe in myself, do it my way. I also understand all the operating systems and the way people do things. I think it's very challenging for people if they prescribe to your way to not understand what the market values to purchase. Like, what are the variables or widgets or things? So there's a conflict there. Although I'm agreeing with you, it's sometimes hard to not go out and look at the external market and figure out what they value in your business if you're just laying bricks. So just for discussion.
100% agree, right? Like that comes up a lot. Like, what do I do to eventually exit one day? You know? And again, I tell people, if your plan is to build a company, obviously, we live in a capitalistic society, make money, do good, or do something that the ecosystem needs. That's the foundation. And you do it and you do it and you do it until you cannot, or until you cannot, and or somebody says to you, hey, again, I'm using Chris as an example. Chris, I'm going to make you an offer you can't refuse. So what's the deal? It's very similar, I think, like to dating, like where you're like, hey, I'd love to get married to one day. I know I wanted to find a wife, the woman of my dreams, but I had to kiss a lot of frogs, literally and figuratively, prior to that. And it wasn't like I wanted to, I just went through the role until I found the right person. And you can't rush that process.
It makes sense to me. All right. So you've laid out a couple of principles. I interjected, might have kind of screwed up your mojo. Anything else you want to lay out?
The other thing I want to lay out, another really big theme is, if you want to grow, you have to spend. I once heard a very literal, simple quote that says, I don't know if we can put this on a wall or anything, but it said, scared money makes no money, which
Yeah,
means,
yeah. Please explain that.
well, look, if you have a good product and you believe in what you're saying and believing what you're building, put money at it. You gotta, and it goes to like pay the right people, put in the right dollars, get the right systems. I'll give you literal term, not even, just code words. Pay your employees the right amount. If you need new software, pay for it. If you need an advisor, get it. If you need legal counsel, get really good attorneys. These are all things you got to pay for. And if you really believe it, you'll pay for it, or you need to, and you will come out bigger and better on the other side. But not many people are willing to do that, even if they have the capital infusion to do so.
Sam, it's because, in my opinion,
Mhm.
when you learn to bootstrap, it may work for you for a while, and you then need to step forward and change your behaviors. And that's so hard. It's so
I
hard.
think that's part of it. Yes, for sure. And then I thought to myself, as you were saying that, how was it? Like, obviously, I was bootstrapped. I had the capital I started with. We weren't making a ton of money, but we were profitable. What caused me to say, you know what? I need to spend $100,000 on a really good attorney to get through this hurdle. I think you need to have a level of humility that says, I don't know all the answers. I need to go to the right person. And in order to do so, there is a dollar cost to that.
Do you think it's related? Sometimes I think it's the margin multiple. When people have strong margins, they have conviction for your message.
Okay. Explain. I can't hear you.
Apologies.
There you go.
Thank you. A higher margin business, a strong business model, there's conviction, there's confidence, there's perhaps a belief in that. Perhaps it's unique to your space that margins are, you're solving a unique problem and you're paid fairly for it. There's lots of different margin models, and I find lower cost margin businesses struggle to take your advice.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. Look, I'm working with a pharmacy right now that is not that profitable, very thin on margins. Okay. And there's ways you can make calculated risk. So is it a risk? Yes. Is it calculated? Yes. I'm not saying throw dollars at every problem. What I'm saying is, okay, if you're a small margin business, here's a literal example. And you want to get in network with an insurance company because that's how you service your patient. You doing an application might not work. So what do? You have to go to an attorney. So what you tell the attorney, you again, maybe someone like myself, who will find you a good attorney, and we will get a pricing that makes sense for you, and we will do it over time so that you can afford that. That's
Understood.
an
So in
actual
other
example.
words, spending money to truly make money without, yeah, that doing it like a lightning bolt where it really matters.
Yeah, I'm not saying throw money at a problem because then there's inflated cost and all that, but like really with like a fine tooth comb, how can I improve? And again, this is something I can understand and speak to founders with, because I can say, hey, I didn't run on crazy margins, but there's also that old adage that you have to take money that you're making and reinvest into the company. So look at it as reinvestment not at, decaying your margins. And also going back to the private equity theme, when you spend money to use growth or to create structures that cause growth, private equity does something called an add back, which means those are one-time hits that not going to happen all the time. So you add it back to your balance sheet. So it doesn't really take a hit on your multiple.
So, in other words, those investments you do kind of get back, you restate your financials
Exactly.
appropriately. All right. So, just checking in. We getting the messages out that matter most? I think we are. I think we're pulsing well. You agree?
I hope so.
I hope so too. Interesting how, I mean, it's a heck of a ride you've been on. I've appreciated the advice that you've shared. How the heck did you, I mean, you had the blessing of being young when you started this business. But another thing that's really relevant is this concept of how entrepreneurs, how presidents take care of themselves. I'm sure if you're holistically helping businesses, sometimes you're telling these presidents to go home. So self-care and those things. What's your belief about how entrepreneurs can survive that? The fact that there's, a bit of an epidemic with entrepreneurs in the mental health side of things. Sam, I've had entrepreneurs on this show openly talk about the anxiety and the depression and the feelings they have on this journey. So I'm just curious, since you've done this, just your thoughts on that, on all of that.
Yeah. Again, I think let's talk about when I was the founder of banks. There was a lot of rough nights, a lot. If I had to say, more than not, meaning more than 50% of the time were rough nights, where you go home with a heavy load on your chest and you're just like, I can't do this. It's just too hard. Every day, you walk in and you're happy, and then something, somebody doesn't show up to work, or something's, crazy, like the power goes out, or, everything's an issue. And, look, I'll be the first one to admit, like, I've done therapy as a person, not for business. Like, I'm not a personal coach. I've had a therapist. Since I was 22 years old. Huge, huge benefit.
I and I advocate for it, personally and on the business side of things. You got to have somebody to talk to.
And I think in the advisory work that I do now, I think reframing it for founders genuinely really helps them. Like, really reframing their thought process. If you talk to some of the people, like, I get to be in these rooms, and I also have to be really in it, but also have a little bit of distance to say, I can't take this home. It's not my company. So if Chris wants to jump off the bridge, knock on wood, he doesn't, I got to let him do it. I can tell him all the things not to do, but I got to let him do it. And I've done the best that I can. That's how I protect myself. Am I doing the absolute best? And I'm literally like in it for these guys, like literally. And I don't know any other way. I'm an all or nothing person. If I'm going to do something, I'm just going to go all in. But a lot of times, these founders, when they really get in their head, I usually, talk to them and give them examples of myself and how I dealt with those moments. And I say to them, you're not the only one dealing with this. We're all in this. Yeah.
I think, Sam, I understand a bit about how you operate and how you're approaching your current business and why those entrepreneurs are benefiting from you. If my audience has not worked with consultants or, worked with a coach per se, there usually is a very distinct line of like emotional connection and involvement. It's, where they're going to give you some advice and, so I tend to be the same way, Sam, when I coach a business. Like, I'm letting them know in an emotional way what they should do, and I'm invested. And sometimes it's hard. It is hard, but I think your customers get a better end product because of it.
And we have a call, full on, like, a over an hour conversation sometime before we even work together. I want to make sure it's this right fit for them and for me. Not every two groups of people can work together. They've got to be open to receiving. Like, my goal is not to just ram things down people's throat or be someone's therapist. Like, my goal is to help their company. So are you ready and willing and able to change?
Yeah, the hardest thing in the world is to be a consultant, to keep pointing something out and come back each month and nothing changes. The
Yeah,
work.
but I do also have very hard conversations with folks, extremely difficult conversations. I worked with a company that was in the red. They were down about 700 a year, 700 grand a year they were losing. They're now up over $250,000 a year in profitability. So we had to have a lot of hard conversation, extremely difficult conversation, but we did it. And, I'm happy he doesn't need to work with me anymore. We've done it. I had one company that got sold to private equity. We've done it. So it feels really good. And it kind of reinforces to me, hey, this is working.
So just checking in with you, where I've laid out a lot of things. Any other areas you'd like to address with your time?
I think one thing, you have a lot of people you mentioned are a lot of founders, and you go back to that adage of like the grass is always greener on the other side. And I know many folks do want to exit. They want to get chips off the table, all those things. I will say post sale, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, post sale is not an easy road. When you go from, your company's everything, it's all you live, eat, and breathe. You're on it. You get people, all these people kind of looking up to you. You're the head honcho. And all of a sudden, you're not needed. That's a tough road. So I would say my advice or kind of thoughts for people who are in this process or thinking about this process is prepare yourself of what you're gonna or what you want to do post sale. Cause I've definitely hit some real lows post sale in my company.
Sam, how do you do that?
How do you,
How do you like what steps do you go through to figure out what's next? Any advice?
yeah, look, if you're in it and you want to stay with the company, right? Like one of the companies I've helped sell or the founder sold, he decided to be in it and
Okay.
it made sense for him. And he kind of structured it in a way that said, hey, I'm going to be in it, but not fully, but I'll invest some money as well and I'll still work. And he likes that. For him, it's like, I'm ready to take some load off. I'll let them lead the way from now on. I'm happy. I want to go back to being an employee, but I still want to feel valuable. So that's two. I'm sure your founders know other founders. That's how they even know about private equity and all these other things. So talk to people, ask them. I think if you're genuine with people, people will genuinely also open up to you. So if you know someone that's like, so the company, instead of saying, hey man, damn, how'd you kill it? You made so much. Saying, how's life? How's it going? Is there anything that I need to be aware of? Where are the skeletons that I need to make sure, I don't trip over? Easy. Not easy. You get like a lot of people, I'm very fortunate, are very open with me. And I think the people that I'm not close to or work with and I see have like a very stern, tough, macho exterior. You're not going to win hearts and minds or getting people to open up with them. You got to be a little vulnerable.
I agree with you. You know, so whatever your version of play golf is or go to lunch with your buddies, in about 90 days, sitting at your desk with nothing to do is not going to feel right if you don't spend time figuring out what you want to be and how you want to contribute. That is for sure. So, Sam, I always ask this question. This seems to have so much more relevance for you. I don't. Were you 21 when you started your business? What age were you?
24.
24. All right. So, you can decide whether you do 21 or 24. What advice would you give that younger person? You can fill in the age.
I think professionally, I don't know if I would really change anything in that 24-year-old. I'm very happy with them in a professional sense because he was young, naive, maybe a little crazy, and just kind of went in. I would tell that 26-year-old, so a couple years in, like, hey, what you're doing is working. I know that there's a lot of headwinds coming at you. Just keep fighting through. Personal level, I would say to that 24-year-old, the same confidence that you have help, that you're using to help create this company. Use that personally also. Like there's some value in you. And I struggled with a lot of self-confidence issues. And, you don't have to be so insecure.
I'm so honored that you shared that. I always like to ask. I don't know if you're a reader, if you have any books that you give out as gifts or a book that you might recommend to the audience.
But my favorite book, probably one of the, if not the uh, most liked book that I like is called Shoe Dog. It's a book about Nike by Phil Knight that he ghost wrote. One of my favorite books of all time.
Quite frankly, your story has a little shoe dog in it. You know,
Yeah.
you got a
Kind of,
little tiger shoes in there, a waffle iron kind of thing going.
yeah, just kind of going to Japan and just kind of saying, hey, can you make this for me? And just kind of knocking on the door and just waiting for the CEO. Yeah, you just kind of got to be a little crazy. In hindsight, if people didn't think you're a little crazy, you probably didn't do it correctly.
And if you don't know what we're talking about, I recommend a lot of books, but you're going to see Shoe Dog from me. First of all, it's entertaining as all get out, but it is the most classic bootstrapping story, frankly, with a big brand name that we probably all have in our home, frankly, in some shape or form. That's a great one.
And I think that's kind of like, how I live, right? Like Phil didn't think he was going to be $1 billion company. He was just iteratively working on these shoes because he had a passion for shoes because he was a runner.
Sam, there's this. I saw the founder of Hercules once speak, and I bet Phil would agree with this, and I know you will. The world is full of finders and minders and binders. And certainly Shoe Dog is the story of the finding. And then eventually the business is run by professionals that can run it at scale. I think it's a story, and it's not that any one group is any better than others, but it's acknowledging the phases of a business that, and sir, I think you're a finder.
Look, I did it as long as I could. And I think you have to let go of that mantle when your time has come.
Yes. All right. Speaking of time, we're winding down. Any final closure you'd like to put to it? It's Sam. It's been great to have you on the show. You're right about the honesty, the humanity about it, the lack of machismo with it. I mean, it is hard, and that we do make mistakes, and there are tough nights, and I think that's what people need to hear.
I've learned since the 3.5 years of the sale of my company that at the end of the day, look, once you kind of sold or you just taken some weight off, the more real you could be, people will really open up to you. And it's a gift that you can give yourself. If I am real with you, I feel better and I don't feel like I have to be on. And I would love to, kind of press that along.
So we're going to extend this for a second because you've really struck something that I think is incredibly important. What Sam's talking about, I believe, is who are you authentically? Who is your authentic self? A lot of times we have to do the work on ourselves to trust our authentic self. And if we don't know our personal values and know what we stand for and know what we want, we often try on other people's values, other people's leadership style. We mimic people around us. We mimic movies we watch, right? The whole coffee is closers things, I think, is where so many salespeople have shown up. So Sam is so on point that you've got to figure out who the heck you are. And, I always say this, Sam, but, when we all walked across the Serengeti and the hair on our neck tingled because we thought there was a lion out there, I think our employees and our vendors and our partners sense when we're not our authentic self.
100%, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. Because you're not being authentic, right? People know, they can sense, they can feel. And the other thing is for the other party, forget what, again, to quote, like to say Chris, forget what Chris thinks. If I'm authentic, I feel comfortable. There's nothing, like, you asked me later, like, there was no prep for this podcast because I didn't, I said to you very frankly, ask me whatever you want. I'm open because I'm just being authentic. And one thing I do want to add for the founder is once you believe in your mission, then start a company and you really believe in it. I will tell you what really worked for me is once I believe in something, I don't let go. It does not matter anymore. If I truly believe in this company, I've had my partners disagree with me. I've had vendors, everyone under the sun disagree with me. And a lot of people agree with me, but it didn't matter. It was just like, hey, this is what I think I need to do. And I'm going to go with it. I'm going to just stick it all out there.
Sam, you are your authentic self, and I think you picked a good platform to do it, where I certainly try to live by that and run the show accordingly. I think you're going to have lots of neat stories ahead. Would you come back once a year and give the world an update of what's going on in your world?
I'd be honored to.
All right.